All right, and we are back. Welcome into another episode of Keeping Up with the New York Jets. Today is Thursday, October 3rd, sandwiched in between the Jets' 10-9 loss to the Broncos and their trip across the pond to London town to take on the Vikings. We have got a fun show coming up, all things Jets. Before we get to that, and before I bring Theodore in, make sure to follow us on our socials at KUWTNYJ. Teddy is at Teddy Huncho. I am at Spring Blake. Young Theodore, how we feeling?
Last week when you asked me that, I went on this nice long thing about how good I'm feeling about the Jets and how fun they made the week. This week is a little different, I'll say, from a Jets perspective. A lot more uncertainty in my bones, a lot more, whatever. But outside of the Jets, I'm doing great. I'm, just living life, working like a dog, getting by. So yeah.
Just
How
your
are you doing,
working
brother?
class American male. Red-blooded American. I'm good. I'm working my ass off. I've officially I came to the realization over this past week, and it's been a huge milestone in my life. I enjoy college football more than the NFL officially.
Wow. It's fucked up to
It's
say.
it's sad.
Jets podcast.
It is sad. I still enjoy the NFL, but I get more excited for college football. And maybe I'm just in a rut right now where NFL games are all just kind of gross. You've got those point totals that are set at like 35 and a half and 37 and a half. And there are fun NFL games when they do happen. But Saturday morning, I wake up buzzing.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's been a weird week for me to finally make that switch. I still love football. I still love talking the Jets and this.
Oh
But
yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're both
football's always
I'm
going to
not ready to go to see college football fully because the NFL, it's just that's what I live and die for still,
I know
especially this goddamn Jets team
this
who
goddamn
keeps
Jets
fucking
team.
doing this
Yeah,
goddamn cycle.
yeah. I
Let's
think
talk about it.
we know we know what happened in the game. Everybody that's listening knows that the Jets put up a
10 to
stinker,
9.
10-9, lose to the Broncos. They were 7.5-point favorites, one of the biggest spreads of the week. The Broncos coming off of a win over Tampa, but still look to be a pretty bad team through their first few weeks. Um, to me, the biggest reminder is like, we've been doing this show for how long? We cannot get too high with this team.
I
Ever.
know. Yeah.
We talk about it always. Like after a win, we can't get too high, and then it just comes
Yeah,
crumbling
I
down.
had my like moment, right, where I got to predict the Jets were gonna blow out the Patriots. They did.
Yep.
And I was feeling real good about this Broncos game. I was. And it was one of those things, like it's not like the Broncos came out and looked amazing, like we only let up 10 points, the defense played good. But all of a sudden our Jets offense felt like it was, you know, in a different way, but it felt like a Zach Wilson Jets game, where we just couldn't get in the end zone. We didn't score a touchdown after scoring 9, through the first 3 weeks, and we get out of there with a just disgusting loss, only scoring the 9 points. Something that I'm sure if you go back and listen to the podcast episodes, from this offseason, I'm sure there's plenty of times we were like, the Jets aren't going to be losing games 10-9 or 10-3 like they have in the past,
Yep.
And here we are. And I think it just leads to a lot of like questions and reactions, some of which are overreactions and some of which are not. So I think it's just going to be a really interesting conversation today, as we try to kind of figure out like, why did this go down?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Because I think all in all, in a bigger point, we put too much pressure and expectations on the simple swap of Aaron Rodgers. We talked about it all the time. It's like Aaron Rodgers is in, the offensive line is going to be better, the run game is going to be better, the play calling is going to be better, the receivers are going to be better, and it's like the offense has been good at several points this season. This past week was not one of them. So I'm not here saying that things are in a terrible spot and we're this 2-2 team that's going to be missing the playoffs, but games like this can still happen. This to me, the biggest issue is the sloppiness of the football team on both sides of the ball. The offense, I think there was 13 total penalties in the game, 5 false starts for a total of 90 yards. One of those 5 false starts came on a pivotal 4th and short that the Jets were going for it, pushes them back to a 4th and 6. Jets settle for a field goal. So that's something where they're on in the opponent's territory, driving down the field, going for it, gutsy call, and then oops, false start. I think it was John Simpson on that one that ends up having to settle for 3. The Jets also had crazy. Tell me if you heard this before last year, Teddy. The Jets got to the 1st and goal on the 1-yard line and ended up having to settle for a field goal. So red zone execution, penalties, dumb ones. You had the Allen Lazard gun finger point for a first down that got flagged. Oh, yeah. It's like I said, combining in the fact that I think I put too much expectations on Rodgers to fix everything, this still does feel like one of those games where we just pulled 2023 tape and put it on a TV with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback instead.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fair point, and I think the biggest indication of that is the penalties and the sloppiness. I mean, that has been the biggest problem, or not the biggest problem, but one of many problems the Jets have had over the past few years is just that inability to like stay disciplined and just not kill yourselves, not beat yourselves. And outside of that, I really do think this game was defined. I mean, what did we talk about on last week when we recorded? It was like the Jets should be able to go in and just run the ball and just absolutely dominate them. And from the first drive, the Jets were just unable to run the ball. I mean, I really do think that is the story of the game, and that is kind of how this all went down because, Braylon Allen 8 for 34, Breece Hall 10 for 4. Aaron Rodgers sneaks in there 5 for 26, not bad. Had a 14-yard rush in there. Yeah. But we have these 2 workhorse running backs and this new, updated offensive line, and it just goes to show you, like, if you're not able to run the ball successfully, it's really hard to win a football game. Didn't have turnovers. I guess we had the one on the first drive with Garrett Wilson, but it's not like it was like, oh, Aaron Rodgers throwing picks, playing sloppy. Like, we just couldn't get anything going because simultaneously, as we're not able to run the ball, we're getting 13 penalties. Yeah. So I mix in a hurricane that's causing rain, right, and it rained the entire game. Like, there's a lot of reasons this didn't go the correct way for the Jets. And I think that like some of it's fixable, but it gives you a lot of pause, like the fact that the Jets weren't able to run the ball at all, that there's a team out there that can just stop them. And it seems like the offensive line's getting no push and they're just getting dominated up front. They're not able to create these holes. I mean, that's the biggest concern to me, along with the penalties. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. When you combine in the sloppiness factor, and then you also combine in some of the quotes afterwards. I mentioned the 1st and goal at the 1 not being able to get into the end zone. I do think play calling as a whole, like I said, in weather games, in games where you can't get one side of the football moving, if you can't run, you kind of are pigeonholed a little bit as far as a game plan or calling plays goes. But, hearing Garrett Wilson come out afterwards and be asked about the offense, or it was a long question. He had this long quote here. Saying basically, I don't think we do a lot of different stuff on offense. When I watch football on Sundays and I see a lot of teams mix it up and stuff like that, I don't feel like we do that. I think we know our identity. It's just about going out and executing it or figuring out if it's going to work. I don't think we try a lot of different things. Sloppiness, inefficiency in the red zone, simple play calling. That is what is now bringing the biggest conversation of the week in Jets land. And that's,
sure,
are we sure we have the right coaches in place? And I think that's most notably Robert Saleh. When we talk about the sloppiness, like I said, 13 penalties on Sunday. They had been better about it so far this season, but they were a team that led the league in penalties last year. I thought at different times in the Patriots game, the offense looked fantastic. We were those long sustained drives, run pass mix up was great. There have been those instances, but when you have games like this, and we also have last year to go back to with Nathaniel Hackett, and we have the last few years to go back to with Robert Saleh, it's supposed to be better this year, and having games like this make us question, we have a fully healthy team. Is it the coaches?
Sure. Sure. Yeah, and that has been the number one conversation, and I definitely do think that's fair. It's kind of like what I said after the 49ers game. It's like, if you want to go out and be like, Robert Saleh sucks, we should get a new head coach, you can't really fault anyone for that, you know?
Right.
Like, how long in football has it, been kind of the general consensus where like if a team is going out and getting a ton of penalties, that's on the coaches, right?
Yep.
That's kind of where I wanted to start this conversation because that is a thing that I always it makes sense, but it also doesn't
Right.
necessarily sit right with me. You know what
Right.
I mean? Because it is like,
They are grown men
hey,
making
if you
millions of
just
dollars.
didn't do that, it would have been fine. You know what I
Right.
mean? Or like the Alan Lazard thing, like, do I think he should have gotten a flag? No. But
No.
it's like that's a play that worked. And then instead of it being a positive play, you're getting a 15-yard penalty that's kind of fucking you. Um, so yeah, I don't know like how much I love just fully putting that on the coaches.
Right.
Um, and I think the conversation is, for me at least, and the forever optimist over here, but this is the type of game where if the Jets go out in the next couple weeks and we see these similar things, that we see them getting penalized a lot, like all these things, then I'll be able okay with all the panic. To me, at 2-2, seeing how the Jets played a couple weeks before, like I think it's a little bit just like Jets fans just going back to like their old ways of like,
Of
God, we
course.
suck so much, and my hope and my belief is that this team does have the talent and the mental aptitude to improve and not look like this, to be able to score touchdowns like they did through the first 3 weeks. Um, but yeah, I don't really know where to land on that. Like, what do you think about like the penalties? Like, is that a coaching thing to you? Is it? I mean, does it have to be? Like, what are your thoughts there?
I
So
don't
hard.
think, yeah, it is tough because it's like you can just they're the best at this sport. They make millions of dollars to play this sport. They should know when they go out there what the snap count is and to not jump beforehand. And Lazard, I agree that shouldn't have been a penalty. How would you know that pointing for a first down and the way that you gesture your hands is all of a sudden going to be 15 yards? Um, I think what I do is I start to combine in the penalties with just the feel of the team where it's like
Sure.
it just becomes this part where it's like, okay, so we're a team that now has players, making comments post game about the lack of the offense, or it just looks like a team that lacks composure, I guess is what I'd say. It's a player issue, but also the coaching staff does have to take a responsibility and set
Yeah.
a standard for those players to kind of not allow that to take over a game or a team's season.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is like I've said it before about Salah, where like I still have this belief that he's like a good coach. When you're losing and when you lose in this fashion, it's incredibly easy to look like an idiot. Like it
Yep.
is. Like you
Yep.
you you can look like a clown because it's like, dude, 9 points. I do think there's some interesting conversations to be had. I want to start with the kind of goal line sequence, and then I want to talk about Garrett Wilson a little bit. Um, the whole thing with the goal line, like we run two plays, run plays with Brees Hall, get stuffed, don't get in. And then they put Braylon Allen in the game, who's a little bit bigger than Brees Hall, and they run two pass plays, one of which has, Solomon
Yeah,
Thomas.
Solomon.
Am I screwing up his name?
No,
I
Solomon
don't know
Thomas.
why it sounds weird. Um, One has Solomon Thomas in, which they've done before, and they ran that same play. You know what I mean? And it didn't work that time, I don't think either. So like I understand fully that sequence is like, what are we doing? You know what I mean? Like I had Braylon Allen to score a touchdown. I'm like, give him the goddamn ball and let him punch it in there. Um, but I do think that is, everyone's acting like Brees Hall is like Jameer Gibbs or like Justice Hill, where it's like, why would we have like Brees Hall is a guy who can run between the tackles and is a guy who has been successful, at the goal line before.
Definitely. All
So I
last
don't think
season.
it's like absurd to, give the ball to your number one running back when you're at the 1 yard line. Like, I don't. And I think that just goes back to, again, we just could not run the ball. The line couldn't get any push. And, that was brutal. And then you want to talk about the next two plays. Should they have given it to Braylon Allen? It's easy that they didn't score to say, yes, they should. You can be as pissed at the coaches as you want at that. It's just an unfortunate situation. So, yeah, it's like, to me, I guess I'm just not, with all of these things, I'm just not ready to like panic until it really becomes a repetitive thing. And I know everyone's going to say, well, hey, we've seen a few years of this. I almost do look at this year as like a fresh start. Like, it is a make or break year, but one game where the offense doesn't look good compared to 3 where they looked pretty good, I'm not going to like panic right now.
Exactly. And I think that's the only reason that it is like that and it's so overreactionary is because we have those years of being
Sure.
Told that we have high expectations for this team. We get to 7 wins in back-to-back years. So it's almost like, hey, if we were 7-10 despite all the mess that we had to deal with last year, how are we not 4-0 to start this season? And it's like, well, the game of football doesn't work like that. I think we're just we're in a year right now. If you look across the league, I said it last week, like football is ugly right now. Football is so ugly. Like half the teams in this league have games like that on a weekly basis.
And teams put up stinkers like they do. Like
exactly.
The Bills just put up a stinker, so I'm just not really into the crazy overreactions about Robert Saleh. Like, is there things to get fixed? Is there things that you need to do better? Of course there are.
Right.
But I'm not convinced that he's not going to be able to figure that out. I do want to talk about the Garrett Wilson because I think this is really interesting. I'm not super worried about his comments. It did sound a little bit better in the context of the clip, and it's also just one of those things where it's like, I still believe in his talent, and I believe that the Jets are going to get him going. It wasn't a surprise that he didn't have this huge game. Like, he's going up against Pat Surtain, who's probably the other best corner in the league, opposite Garrett Wilson, Sauce Gardner. But I did think it was interesting, right? So Garrett Wilson fumbles on his first reception, gives the ball to the Broncos, and they get 3 quick points that we just gifted them, basically. And it took him a while to really get another target. It was either late into the second quarter or into the third quarter. And then you pair that with, it did seem like there were times where he was maybe not wide open, but open enough that, you would think Rodgers would throw it.
Yeah.
And I guess that's a little bit of my worry is like, is there some type of just mistrust or just not being on the same page where Rodgers is like, maybe I won't throw that one. You know what I mean? And that's what you got to avoid. Like, it did seem like he was going to Lazard and going to Mike Williams a little bit more often. But with that said, it's like, hey, he's got Patrick Surtain on it. So I don't know how to read that, but that definitely did stick out to me of, it's like, okay, well, either Garrett Wilson is just not getting open against Pat Surtain, which there were certainly plenty of routes like that. But then it was like, hey, it kind of feels like you could have thrown that and he's just not,
Trying to get him involved.
So getting these two guys on the same page is certainly like needing to be a focus, and just getting Garrett Wilson, get him an 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 target game so that he can really start to feel confident in his game and things like that. But this was just a weird one. It really was. It was just, they couldn't get it working all day. And I think the big thing with Garrett Wilson, I agree with what he said about his routes. Like, he's running a lot of slants and a lot of shallow crosses. And like, that's all I really saw him do, a lot of just like cutting inside.
Yeah.
I think the Jets are utilizing Mike Williams and Alan Lazard in the way that their skill set presents, to be those outside guys, to be running those go routes. But I do think that you need to have more creativity with your wide receiver one, who's the most talented guy out there on the field. You know what I mean?
Totally agree. Just for his number, he was targeted 11 times in that first game against the 49ers, and since then it was 6 against Tennessee, 9 in New England, and 8 against Denver. So you're right. You would expect...
Which aren't horrible, but
no.
It's just...
But especially in games where you are struggling to get things going on offense, like specifically I think of the Titans game for a few, periods there when they were struggling to get moving, or just the entirety of that Denver game. we've seen him do that plenty of times with Davante Adams, who we'll talk about later today. Like, he will force feed that wide receiver to get him in a groove, get him comfortable, even early in a game to just set the tone for what the game is going to look like. You're right. Pat Surtain, an ugly game in the weather. I think maybe Rodgers and the offense was afraid of being able to hold up for some longer pass plays as well too. So maybe that plays a role into just like, let's get Garrett in space and see what he can do after the catch. But yeah, the creativity as a whole definitely hasn't been as great as you'd want it.
Yeah. I'm a big believer too, like he fumbled that first play. Like I'm of the fact of like get him the ball the next time you're out. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Yeah,
get him back in where he feels
exactly.
comfortable. Like I always love when teams are like, "Hey, we're not going to go away from our best player." You know what I
Exactly.
mean? And it took a while for him to get involved in the game. Um so yeah, it was just interesting, and there was the obvious miscues, right? Like on that last drive on the 3rd and long, where all he had to do was turn around and he could have, located that ball and gotten us a first down,
Yeah.
and he just kept running. And it's like these things where for sure he needs to get on the same page as Aaron Rodgers. Like I don't fault Rodgers for that really because he's trying to make the throws that are gonna, be open. But I think that is a fair notch to the coaching staff of just like we need to know that this is the guy who needs to be targeted in creative ways and hand run a full route tree. You know what I mean? Like there's no reason Garrett Wilson should just be running slants and little short routes the entire game. Of course, use him that way, try to get him the ball quick, but you need to be able to, kind of be unexpecting with the defense like that you're playing. So yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not like I said, like you could kind of see this coming with the Broncos defense with the rain. But that part of the coaching is, it's like let's get a little more creative and let's not have Garrett Wilson being like, yeah, I don't really run that many routes. Like you want him to feel like he can do it all because he can.
Yeah, I was looking up for comparison. I was just curious. 2020 season, Davante Adams averaged 11 targets a game. And one
Yeah.
of those games he had 3 targets in because he got banged up. Like, you can get Garrett more involved, he's that talented and deserves that.
To me, it's like I don't, and like again, you have Pat Surtain. Teams are scheming for it,
Ugly
whatever.
weather.
But it's like in your scripted plays, in your first 15 plays, like you should be throwing the ball to Garrett
5.
Wilson like 3, 4, 5 times. Like you really should.
Yeah.
Or at least running plays where he is the number one read. And it just felt like Lazard was like okay, this is the guy I trust in this game, which makes sense. And I'm happy
Yeah.
that Lazard has been able to be a reliable guy, but Garrett Wilson is this dynamic playmaker. And, just to be clear, like, again, all of this also stems from we could not run the ball and things get a
Hmm.
lot harder. Like, it felt like we were at 2nd and 9, 3rd and 9 all day, which was
Yeah.
something in the first 3 games. It really felt like we were avoiding that. We were getting into 2nd and manageables, 3rd and shorts, where this was like, yeah, it's fucking raining, and then we're at 3rd and long. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, ugly game from the offense. Outside of that, too, like I don't want to put a ton of blame on Rodgers because I think Rodgers played well
Yeah.
for what he could.
I agree.
But whether you want to call it bad throws or the weather or whatever, like there were certainly a lot of missed opportunities because of, a throw that he made. And I'm certainly willing to blame the weather and the wet ball. Like that's
Yeah.
fine, but those were there as well. So you're stacking that up with a running game that can't get going, with, you're not able to get your best, most talented playmaker involved in the game with 13 penalties. It just was that recipe for disaster, and we just watched it play out and it was like, God fucking damn it.
Yeah, I'm glad we've made it through 4 games here and we haven't gotten on Rodgers for anything yet. I was always, we will go like 1 game in and really rip in on Zach, and I'm just happy for us because
Yeah.
we are patient and understanding, and he's been great also. Like
Yeah. I
he's
think,
been
I think
awesome.
like, this game, again, whatever, because of the rain and all that, but like he didn't look bad. Made some incredible throws. Like, especially the 3 games before this, though, like if you saw people like talking down on Rodgers or like acting like he wasn't playing well, like that was just a surefire, like, that guy did not watch the game. He hasn't been
Exactly.
watching the Jets because Rodgers has been outstanding. And that's the thing, too. Like, we called this a Zach Wilson game. Like, the Zach Wilson game would have been,
Yeah.
13 for 35 with 130 yards and 2 picks.
Yep.
Whereas we scored 9 points. Rodgers didn't have any picks. He threw for 225. Like, it wasn't the end of the world. But again, you pair that with the penalties, you pair that with the rushing. It was just an ugly, ugly game. I don't know how much more time we want to spend on this. I do want to talk about the defense quick.
Yeah.
Because there were some negatives, right? Like, I think a lot of people are pointing to, the D line and the lack of pressures. Will McDonald, only guy to register QB pressures, had 3 of them. Will McDonald's run block PFF grade was like the worst of his career, like absolutely horrible, kind of exposed, like, for what you kind of fear with him, that he's not a 3-down player, he's a pass rusher, he's not a run stopper. Those things are fair, but this is similar to a Zach Wilson game where people are trying to cut holes in the defense. Like, this defense let up 3 points off a short field, off a fumble, and then they let up a touchdown on a broken play where Courtland Sutton's wide open. Should that have happened? No, but the defense played outstanding. Like, they did. I mean, they dominated the entire day. They didn't let the Broncos score. So yeah, I mean, this was an offensive whiff for sure. I don't think there's much negative you can talk about with the defense.
Yeah, the only thing that I would come to is that in the second half, the Broncos really leaned on the run game and was able to kind of sustain a couple long drives that way. Like, they did rush for 126 yards in the second half. That game-winning drive to kick the go-ahead field goal came on 7 straight runs. Like, there were to a lesser extent, it did feel a little bit of what San Francisco did in week 1, where it was just like run. All of a sudden, the Broncos figured it out.
The problem with that is they didn't score. And we had opportunity after opportunity after opportunity to score on it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yes, there were those things, but it was also just like, come on, boys. Like,
the Jets defense held the Broncos to 10 points. And I don't think we think highly of the Broncos at all. I still don't leave that game thinking that, oh, wow, the Broncos are this actually really improved team. Bo Nix looked horrible. And, the offense really struggled really for the majority of that game. I was just saying, numbers wise, when the Broncos did choose to lean on the ground game is when they started to patch together a couple long drives. But I agree. Yeah. That's still no. We were sitting here last year. If we got this result out of the defense, we'd be saying how amazing it was. It's just the fact that we have heightened expectations with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, and it's frustrating when you have games like this.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, like, we're up 6-0, and I'm pissed off that the Jets aren't scoring more. Yeah. But I was also like, well, yeah, I mean, we're
just trying to get a win.
We're gonna win. Yeah, like, it's fine because they're not gonna be able to score. So I'm realizing now they didn't even score a field goal off that Garrett Wilson fumble. So it's like, the defense, in my opinion, was fine, and people are just. This game was the blame of this game is on the offense, on the penalties, and on the run game. Like, you need to be able to run the ball. Yeah, it's as simple as that. You know what I mean? And we could not do it. It'll be interesting to see if the Jets do make some type of adjustment with Breece and Braylon. I mean, it's not like Braylon had 8, Breece had 10. But I fully expect Breece Hall to bounce back this upcoming week. I'm wearing my Breece Hall jersey. I'm willing to chalk this up to a rain game. I really am. Call me an optimist. I'm willing to chalk this up to a weather game. But again, it's like, we just need to see it not happen again in consistent weeks. You know what I mean? Like, I'm okay with a stinker as long as they're able to get back to, hey, we're a pretty good team. So it'll be interesting what they do this upcoming week in London.
Definitely. I'll chalk it up to the Jets preseason officially being done. That's what I'll say. Get me through September. Get me through, teams across the league now are not playing their players for the preseason. This is the Jets offense figuring itself out. If you think about this team and why the defense has looked great in just about every one of their games so far, or at least half of them, it's a lot of continuity on that end. It almost should be expected that some games are going to look this this much of a struggle because there are so many new pieces that you're integrating. A new quarterback changes so much to a team when it comes in. And then you've also got a couple different tackles. You've got a different left guard. You've got a right guard coming back from a season-ending injury for the second year in a row. Like, there are so many moving pieces.
Yeah.
This is really the first live action all of them are getting together. And so I am just chalking it up to this was the Jets. This first month of the season had great moments too. Patriots game, awesome. Parts of the Titans game, awesome. I'm just chalking it up to the Jets are figuring out who they are right now, and it's preseason football in September.
I think what it does, like similar to what we said after the 49ers game, right? Like it sets up the Jets on a bit of a pendulum. I'm not sure if that really works here, but I'm going to say it, a pendulum, where we're either going to, bounce back and look good. Ooh, nice pit stain, Blake.
Yeah, sweaty.
We're either going to bounce back and look good and show like, hey, we can be resilient, we can fight. Or, if you keep these things rolling and you kind of look pedestrian on offense and all these things again, that's when I'm okay. Okay, hit the panic button. Go ahead, Jets Twitter, like go off. But it's one of those wait and see moments for me, because if the Jets are able to bounce back and, do more of what they did against these other teams, then it's like, all right, you kind of forget about this game right away.
Yeah, so that was actually going to be my last question before we pivoted to some other stuff, is like, at what point for you would it start to settle in, or would the panic start to settle in? Because the next 3 games, we're going to preview Vikings. They are undefeated this season, early morning game in London this Sunday. Then you've got the Bills 3-1 the week after that. Then you also have the Steelers the week after that, another 3-1 team. So tough games coming forward. I think, we're playing results a little bit too much. The Steelers are 3-1. They're probably not that great. I think very highly of the Vikings, but like, how many games in until you start to be like, man, what do we got going on here, Bob Saleh?
Yeah, I mean, if you're asking me when I'm going to be like, fire Robert Saleh, if we lose all 3 of those games,
2 and 5,
I'd probably get to that point, just because then it's like, Jesus Christ, like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
But I mean, like, if we're at 2 and 3, and I think the Vikings are a good team, like we'll talk about them. I think that's going to be a really interesting game, and I think that will be a hard fought game, for the Jets to win. But if we're at 2 and 3, it's like, what the fuck, man? Like, what? Like, we got to step it up and be better. And then you have the Bills, and so then that really sets up to like, if you can't win one of these games against the Vikings and the Bills, who the Bills are of course one of the top however many teams, Super Bowl contender in the league. And the Vikings are looking that way. They're playing that way with a great defense, and Sam Darnold's balling. But if you're not able to win one of those games, then it's just like, we're clearly not where we need to be. You know what I mean? Because you draft Braylon Allen and Breece Hall and bring in Mike Williams to go with Garrett Wilson and bring in Aaron Rodgers. You do all that to be able to compete with the best of the best. You know what I mean? And week 1 against the 49ers, it's easy to say, well, hey, it's week 1. But if all of a sudden you're sitting there with losses to the 49ers, Vikings, Bills, and Broncos, and it's like, well, what the fuck are we doing? That's when the panic really will set in.
I'd agree. Interim head coach Nathaniel Hackett does have a nice ring to it too.
Jesus Christ.
All right, let's move on. That's a lot of talk about the Broncos, but I know. I feel like it pertains to a lot of season outlook stuff. So it all ties into what is important in Jets land this week. But you know what else is important in Jets land this week? Davante Adams officially requested a trade from the Las Vegas Raiders, who are expected to honor that request. And from what we hear, the Jets appear to be the favorite to land him. Davante Adams told the Raiders that he prefers both the Jets and Saints as his destinations, reuniting him with both either Aaron Rodgers or Derek Carr, who he played with at Vegas and Fresno State in college. Other teams have been floated around as like could be interested, such as Pittsburgh, Washington as well too. Kind of those teams that have ramped up expectations, I guess, for their season. Washington, most notably, you're like, oh, we're sitting there atop the NFC East. Let's go get this guy. Other teams that have been floated around as well too, Dallas, Kansas City. There was a little bit of Rams buzz. They don't really seem to be in on it because also with acquiring Davante Adams, you also have to pay him about $14 million remaining on his contract this season. The Raiders have set the asking price at a second round pick plus something. I don't know what something means. And seem to be fine playing the waiting game since they can just be patient with this and hope that at some point a team gets desperate enough to make the move. So, Theodore, where do you want to take this conversation? Do you want to start with your thoughts on should they do it? What do you think here with Davante Adams?
Well, the first thing I want to say about Davante Adams is it's really not hard to kind of get into his mindset. You can kind of just look at everything he's done and everything he's said. You know, he leaves the Packers in free, or I guess did he get traded from the Packers or was that free agency?
I think it was free agency.
Yeah, well, regardless,
it might have been.
He left to, go play with his college quarterback and Derek Carr from Fresno State. And then in the offseason, whenever they talk about him reuniting, what does he say? He says, I would love to be back with Aaron Rodgers. He goes to the Raiders who have Derek Carr at the quarterback he wants, and then he immediately leaves. And then it's kind of like, well, yeah, of course I don't want to be here.
Right.
I came for that guy.
And now it's Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell.
Right. So I think it makes a lot of sense that, the Jets and Saints are his number one destinations. And I think if you were to ask him, where's the number one place I want to go, I think he would say the Jets, because I think that's what he wants to do at the end of the day is play with Aaron Rodgers. When it comes to my opinion on the whole thing, I'm kind of in if they do it, that's sick. We get a better player. I'm not too upset about giving it up because I am of the mind of just go out there and win a Super Bowl. Do what you have to do. If this move makes you closer to winning a Super Bowl, even if you don't, I'm glad that you tried. I'm glad that you went and made the moves. But on the other hand, it's I do think we have a very talented wide receiver group. I don't think we're this desperate team who desperately needs wide receiver help. And I do think that adding in Davante Adams to a room where you feel like Garrett Wilson's your clear one, and then you have solid complementary guys with Mike Williams and Allen Lazard, it will kind of be okay, how do all these guys fit together? And that's going to create some type of tension, Allen Lazard is Aaron Rodgers' buddy. He's a guy Aaron Rodgers trusts. He's been very effective through the first 4 weeks. Does he fall off and become the number 4 guy? Or is Mike Williams, the guy you just paid a bunch of money to come play for you, signed him in the offseason so he could come back, even coming off an ACL, ramping him up, getting him comfortable in the offense. Is he the guy you take snaps away from? I think that presents its own opportunity or its own challenges. But at the end of the day, it's Davante Adams. He's a good player who Aaron Rodgers is familiar with. So I don't know which side is correct, but I'm kind of at just whatever happens, I'm cool with.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more against it, and I think I have been this entire process, so that shouldn't come as a surprise. I just think we just spent 5 minutes talking about how Garrett Wilson was unhappy with, his route tree and his involvement in the offense, and he's not getting fed the targets. You talk about what it would take away from a guy like Mike Williams or Allen Lazard, but Davante Adams' skill set is more in line with a Garrett 100%. Wilson. So Garrett Wilson's that's going to eat into his role more than anything. Obviously, you'll put both of them on the field because they're both two of the best wide receivers in football. But, we just talked about Garrett Wilson, who we think is the best player on this Jets offense, struggling to get involved in the offense at times. And Davante Adams coming in will only further complicate that. I don't think that the Jets are a Davante Adams away from winning a Super Bowl. I don't think right now that this team resembles a Super Bowl winning roster. That's not to say they can't develop into that. Like I just said when we were talking about the Broncos game, I think this offense really still is figuring out itself. But when I think of what the Jets need to push further, I think more on the defensive line. I think being able to, I would say it's almost offensive coordinator that would be number 2 in line there. To me, there are other things that would be more impactful. Now, yes, those pieces aren't available. So it's well, if the only guy that's available to get is Davante Adams, then sure, go ahead. But 31, no guaranteed. There's no guaranteed money on the contract after this season. So realistically, you could keep him around, but it's a hefty price. And if you don't, you gave up a second round pick and something to just lose a guy the next season. If he has a good season, he's going to want all of that money, or, he'll want to go make a lot of money elsewhere. To me, this just seems like a decision that could end up burning the Jets in more ways than one, where I don't view it as something that is like the Jets have Davante Adams, Garrett Wilson, everything is solved, hallelujah, we're going to the Super Bowl. So that's where I kind of
Yeah,
lean against the decision. I think it could cause more issues as opposed to like the one solution of getting the Jets to the
sure.
promised land.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Like if the Jets are gonna figure it out and are gonna be a Super Bowl contender, it's a lot of other things have to happen, right? Other than like the wide receiver room improving. Because again, I feel like the wide receiver room has been fantastic through 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I do agree with, like, I do. And I just feel like dumb being like, no, I don't want Davante Adams. You know what I
Yes.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's like if they go get him, it's like sure. But let's be realistic, like it does feel like the highest probability situation is that the Jets trade for Davante Adams and then don't win a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? Like it I want the Jets to win a Super Bowl as much as the next guy. That doesn't seem though that is going, like we might win the Super Bowl even without Davante Adams, the same probability that we would with him. So yeah, I think that's a fair point. I definitely don't love the idea of giving up a second round pick plus paying him. If anything, it would have to be a situation where like the Raiders are just willing to eat some of his salary just to get him out of there. Um, but yeah, it's weird because while I agree with you, I do think there's elements of like the Jets, despite, adding Mike Williams, signing Alan Lazard, having Garrett Wilson, like over the past 3 years or 2 years, we'll say, like they haven't stopped their attempts to get another guy in here.
Yeah.
I think they've always been checking in on Davante Adams. They checked in right away this morning when we were recording, or yesterday morning. Um, to figure out a price and be part of these conversations. So like, I don't know. I kind of am just okay with either, but I do think I lean a little bit with you where it's like I'd rather just not and improve with the team we have, but I'm not gonna be mad if the Jets sign Davante Adams or trade for him.
Yeah, I just think it's bad roster management. I think
Yeah,
if
no, I think it's fair.
because like when you're looking at for this season, you're like, okay, well, Aaron Rodgers is a really old quarterback. He doesn't have too many years, so like we are very much in this like all in now mode. And look, I was thinking about it when you were talking because like I also want Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers to link up. It's an awesome duo. I was thinking of the last decade. It's got to be the second most fun duo that I've got to watch quarterback receiver other than Mahomes and Tyreek Hill. Like I'm trying to think what other duos have been more
Yeah.
enjoyable to watch on a week
For
in
me,
week
to
out
me,
basis.
Davante Adams on the Packers was
His skill set
the
is unreal.
far and away best wide receiver in the league.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that,
Hands down.
it's sometimes it's very often hard to pick a number one. Like there was a solid stretch there where I was like Davante Adams is the best by a mile.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So I want it to happen too. I hate the price of it. I hate the fact that it
what
will
it would do to
eat
Garrett
in
Wilson.
to Garrett
Yeah.
Wilson, that it isn't a desperate need. If we were sitting here and it was we have Mike Wilson or Mike Williams, we have Alan Lazard, we're just missing that alpha number one wide receiver.
Yeah.
Then yeah, that it's like a second round pick is worth finding that guy. But to me, when there's a chance that Davante Adams is only here for, say they trade him at the deadline for 6 games and you give up a second round pick, um, that's when I start to get like, I don't really
Yeah.
love the idea of doing that.
I think also like how well Lazard and Mike Williams have been and how reliable they've been. Like
Yeah.
Mike Williams obviously hasn't been this crazy player like with these big stats or big snap counts or anything like that. If you just look at like all of Mike Williams' targets, like his success rate has to be like 80-90%
Hmm.
because he is just making plays when we need him to. And when he's getting targets, he is making plays more times than not. And then Lazard has been like this reliable, awesome receiver through 4 weeks. Um, so yeah, I think we just gotta let it play out. I'll be willing to say I'll go on your side and say my preference is probably for it to not happen. But again, if it happens, let's just hope for the best.
I do have one caveat.
Here we go.
If this trade could somehow solve the
Send one
Hassan
back.
Reddick
Oh.
situation, if you can work a 3-teamer where Davante comes in, Hassan Reddick goes out, you maybe either get an edge piece back in or a pick that you can recoup from giving up the second. I also just we made it like 50 minutes into the show without saying Hassan Reddick's name, and I had to find a way to weasel him in here. But like, if you can solve that headache, because I just don't think it's getting solved anymore this season. And the Jets do have a need on the defensive line. So if there is something where you can finagle a third team that wants to take on Reddick, getting Davante in, you get maybe a little bit of a pick compensation for Reddick, and you give up the second for Adams.
Yeah,
I'm in.
You're almost killing two birds with one stone.
Yeah, just because I just want that situation to be
That
over.
result.
And if
Sure.
you can say that we got rid of Hassan Reddick while also acquiring Davante Adams, I'll be very happy in that situation. So that would be my one area where I'm like, okay, at least you were able to use this situation to solve another.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't know what team out there wants Hassan Reddick. Did you see? That's so crazy. It can't be the Eagles. I didn't know that was in the NFL.
I know. I
rules.
did not know that rule.
Crazy.
Can't trade him back for 2 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, let's head over to London. I mean, we got a
Hello.
long pod going
Can
here
we do
today.
Can we do it in an accent for the entire one? Hello,
Yes,
Theodore.
I won't.
The Jets opened up as 4-point favorites. Oh, dude, Jess is. I think I told you she's addicted to Harry Potter. I come home from work every day. Harry Potter's just on.
That's
It's
sick.
just on.
I
It's
wish
the
I
best.
liked Harry
Oh,
Potter.
it's
I wish.
awesome. It's awesome. But yeah, the Jets are heading over to London. They've already gone to London, correct?
Yeah.
They left
we played
Wednesday
them.
when we were recording.
Oh. I mean, I don't fucking know.
I think they're already on their way or already there. Anyways, play London. Play London. They head to London. Jesus, let's start that over. The Jets are heading to London, week 5 of the regular season, and they are taking on the 4-0 Minnesota Vikings, head coached by former Jets quarterback Kevin O'Connell,
There we go.
and starting quarterback Sam Darnold.
Yep.
Crazy game.
A lot of people had this game circled, especially this Broncos Vikings back-to-back. The big joke was, hey, we could get Zach Wilson and Sam Darnold. And a lot of people like me were like, probably both those guys are going to be on the bench. But JJ McCarthy gets hurt, Sam Darnold comes in, and who's the freaking MVP of the league through 4 weeks? Sam fucking Darnold. I can't decide if I'm happy for Sam Darnold, because I am. I always rooted for him, and I always I thought he was cool, and I thought that he'd get a lot more respect if he could just be good and play well,
Yeah.
and people would like him better. And I think that is starting to happen. So that's good. But I've also been playing this dance for the last few years where he went to Carolina and was bad and had a few good halves, and then went to the 49ers and was bad when he got opportunities there. And I was just kind of sick of everyone being like, well, Sam Darnold might still be good if he's just not on the Jets. But then what does he do? He just starts balling out. So good for Sam Darnold, I guess. I'm a little pissed about it, but good for Sam Darnold. But yeah, my thoughts on this game, dude, I'm nervous for sure. I mean, this team has just refused to slow down. You know what I mean? You keep thinking, hey, this is where they're going to fall off a cliff, and it just has yet to happen. And outside of Sam Darnold, you have Justin Jefferson at receiver. You have a guy like Jordan Addison, who's coming back off an injury a few weeks now and going to have his feet under him a little bit.
Week.
You have a good running back in Aaron Jones. And a revelation. You mix that all with a great defense. You do. So I think it's going to be a very, very, tough game, and I think it's an opportunity for the Jets to kind of show up and look good. But certainly I'm not feeling the way that I felt the past 2 weeks about this game.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think the Vikings are one of the best teams in football, and obviously you're looking at a 4-0 team, so it's not a crazy statement to say, but early on in the season, records can mean one thing versus another. I remember the year the Steelers started 10-0, and they were one of the worst 10-0 football teams I've ever watched. This team looks the part of a very complete team. It's not just the fact, like you said, Sam Darnold has been incredible this year. With the Jets, he completed 59.8% of his passes. He is up to 68.9% completion percentage this season, 11 touchdowns to 3 picks. That is almost an opposite of what he did in his final Jets season of 9 touchdowns to 11 picks. Not really, but I'm just trying to have fun with you.
The 11.
I'm just having fun with you. Go ahead.
No, and I think the crazy thing about Sam Darnold is it's not like he's just like playing okay and getting by.
He's playing
like,
great.
He's balling. You know what I mean? Like 11 touchdowns
Yeah.
through 4 weeks is spectacular. It really is, especially, you know, when you look at offense across the board this season, they have been, you know, a step above everybody else from that perspective offensively. I think that a big benefit that we can at least have is that it is the London game. You know, you can expect both teams to be a little groggy, come out slow. You know, people always love the Lunder. I do think that plays into the Jets' favor a little bit, just to like hopefully help slow down the Vikings offense. And I do still think the Jets have this fantastic D. Like I don't think it's gonna be like, you know, this blowout or anything, but this is a very solid team, and it's gonna take the Jets, you know, doing all the things they didn't do last week to overcome. You know what I mean? They need to clean up the penalties. They need to be able to run the football, you know, and then they need to be able to effectively utilize Garrett Wilson and the rest of their receivers to actually move the ball and score some touchdowns.
And it will be tough to do that because Brian Flores has got this defense humming. You know, last year the Vikings defense was very good, and it's even better so far this season. It has done a great job, you know, holding defenses down in the first half. You know, they've allowed a few comebacks. Last week they did against who did they play? Green Bay. Green Bay came back late in the second half. They've been tested, their schedule, by the way. 49ers, Texans, Packers, like I just said. Like, they've played good teams, and both sides of the footballs look great. But Brian Flores is, to me, he's been one of my favorite coaches in football over the last, has he been around for a decade now when he was back with New England? Like, he is awesome. He will get, hopefully, a head coaching opportunity next season. It's going to be a challenge on both sides of the ball for the Jets. They're going to be really tested here. All phases of the game. You cannot come out and have 13 penalties against this Vikings team. If you come out and are sloppy, it won't be a 10-9 game. It will be one of those blowout games.
Yeah. I mean, this Vikings team, like you said, great defense, you know, allowed 6 against the Giants, 17 against the Niners, who we got destroyed by, remember, week 1. And only allowed 7 points against Houston, which is an explosive offense with a lot of great players. And then their offense, like they've scored 30 points 2 weeks in a row, and then 23 and 28. Like, they have been humming on all cylinders. Like, they really have. Call me crazy. Maybe it's time for them to come back down to earth a little bit. You know what I mean? And I think that a London game against the Jets defense is a good opportunity for that. But, you know, whether the Jets hold them to 10 points or, you know, let them score 24, 20, 28 points, I do think that this game, you know, it's going to come down to the offense, and it's going to come down to how do they respond after what they did last week. Because, you know, that is needed in this NFL, right? Like, you can obviously get by in ugly games and win and you know, win 23-17 or have these ugly games, win 10-9 maybe if you're the Broncos. But if we want to see success and we want to feel confident in this team, we need to get back to, oh, hey, the Jets offense scored 3 touchdowns again this week against a formidable defense. And, you know, really like put our mark on the game that way, because I don't expect our defense to just completely shut them down like they would against the Patriots or like they would against the Broncos. You know, Sauce Gardner, I think, best cornerback in the league. He's going against the surefire best receiver in the league, and Justin Jefferson, you know. So that'll be an interesting thing to watch. Is he following? Is he shadowing? So far, the Jets have done a little of that, but they save a lot of it for like third down, big plays. It's like, just put Sauce Gardner on the best player.
Right.
So yeah, it'll be interesting. But I do think like offensive efficiency, the ability to run the ball, those are the things you need to look for that are going to define the game and be the keys to the game for the Jets.
Vegas does seem to be on your side as well, too, with the coming down to earth. This originally opened up as Vikings -4. The over-under was set at 44. Both of those numbers have dipped now. The Vikings are just 2.5-point favorites, and that point total is sitting at 40.5.
That's
So
interesting.
it does seem to be on the side of the Jets and a scrappy, low-scoring game.
Yeah, which I don't dislike that at all. You know, me and one of my friends were playing video games actually, and we were talking about what we thought the spread would be. We both guessed 4. Just because the Jets put up that stinker and the Vikings have looked so good, but it does make some sense. Like I would have taken the Jets +4. You know, I still think, and I'm going to take them to win, but yeah, it's
2.5 now feels like a rat line.
Oh yeah, of course it does. But it's one of those things where it's like if you're not a Jets fan, I don't see why you wouldn't bet on the Vikings.
I know.
You know what I mean? But I don't know. So it'll be interesting. I do think the fact that it's in London and it's going to be a low-scoring game helps us a little bit. I think that if we can slow down this offense, that's going to be great because that's what they've been able to do, you know, score 31 points, score 38 points the week before. So yeah, so basically my analysis is that the offense needs to play well and the defense needs to play well for the Jets.
Expert analysis right there.
Yeah.
And that's why they pay you the big bucks, Theodore.
Yeah.
I don't know if I don't know if you have any insider thoughts on this. Do you think there's any added motivation for that team, for the Vikings? Not just the fact that they're 4-0, because you could catch a team slipping up now, but do you think there's that added motivation that their quarterback, who is balling out right now, is going up against the team where drafted him with the 3rd pick, blamed him for a lot of struggles throughout his career. He wasn't good there. Is that something that the Vikings can use as like, yeah, we're 4-0, but like we've got this other added motivation for this specific game?
I certainly think so. At least like especially Sam Darnold, right? Like it's been years. He's been on plenty of teams, but this is the team that drafted him. It's the team he didn't succeed with. It's the team that shipped him away. You know, that's going to be there for him. And then I think as a teammate, when your guy's balling out and then he's going to go back to his, you know, like I don't think that a revenge game is always really on the top of the mind for your teammates. Mm-hmm. I think most of them are just like, yeah, we play an NFL team this week. Oh, it's the Jets used to play there. Like, but it does feel like with how well he's playing that they're going to really be rallying around him in a lot of ways. Right. So that's for sure something you need to think about. But from the Jets' perspective, I hope there's a little bit of like, let's just crush this guy so that we don't have to deal with that. You know what I mean? Yeah. But no, I think that's extra motivation for Sam Darnold and extra motivation for, you know, the team as a whole. I will say, you know, I said good for Sam Darnold earlier, but also kind of like it sucks seeing him be good somewhere else. Like I would really fucking love to, you know, pick him off a few times, only let him throw 1 or 0 touchdowns and really shove it in his face because that's the only real like win we could get here.
And I'm such a mean friend because I'm on the other hand over here thinking about like them just like in the 4th quarter up 20 just to like pouring it down and taking shots down the field. I'm just like thinking of them just being like, yeah, an extra fuck you.
Yeah, fuck that. That will suck dick. So
all right, predictions. We've been doing we were on a little bit of a longer end here. What are you gonna do with this game?
Let's get out of here. You know, I'm gonna go Jets. I just can never not pick the Jets to score 24 points. So I'm going to say the Jets 27, Vikings 21. You know, a lot of people are going to like the Lunder. I think it's just going to be one of those games.
I think it's going to be opposite too.
I think it's just going to be one of those games where I think our offense is going to respond, and I think the Vikings offense is good enough that they're going to be able to put up some points against our defense.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I do think the Jets are going to be able to win. Do I actually believe that, or am I just hopeful? I'm not very sure, but check in with me next week and we'll talk about it.
Yep, yeah, we can talk about that next week. I am gonna take the Vikings here, and I will say it will be a 26-17 game. How you get to 26? A lot of field goals. But right, what do I need?
Yeah, I need 4 field goals, 2 touchdowns.
Maybe yeah, Ben don't break defense. No, but I want Sam to throw for like 4 touchdowns in this. Huh.
Maybe they go for 2, don't get it, and then go for 2 again. And
I love it.
Get it.
I love it. 26-17. The Vikings get the win. It's not over. I think the Jets look better than they did in the Broncos game, and I think that with Buffalo and Pittsburgh coming up, they can still get above 500 with those two teams. But this one, I think, slips away from them. I also don't like being a little bit older of a team traveling to London. I know we've got young pieces, but I'm thinking like your older tackles. You got Aaron Rodgers that's a little bit older. I don't know. Vikings
teams are just
young, hungry.
Quite literally,
weird stuff happens.
Anything can happen.
Yeah.
Jets. It could be a
9-6 game
where it's 9-6. It could be a crazy game where it's 35-34. The Vikings could blow us out, or we could blow that. Like, London game, you throw everything out the window. Because I can't, like, you can say whatever you want, right? Like, what if I say, hey, well, we're an older team, we have more experience, we're going to be able to handle that better.
We're ready.
So yeah, it'll be interesting, but hey, it's the Jets versus Sam Darnold with an actually good team.
Crazy.
I don't think we won that Panthers game, his first game after he left us.
I don't think so either.
So maybe a little revenge for the Jets, but we'll see. I like that it's early. Going to get it out of the way. Going to watch a nice Jets win. Then get to watch all the 1:00 games. Let's get this done, boys.
Sorry, the tortured friend in me just keeps thinking about just like what happens, how the rest of your Sunday goes if it's like 28-10. It's just like they ran out of London.
God damn,
it'd be fun. It'd be interesting games. It's a good team. Hats off to what they've been able to accomplish so far this year. All right, that will wrap us up. A long show. Thank you for listening, watching. Follow us on our socials, KUWTNYJ, Teddy at Teddy Huncho. I am at Spring Blake. Enjoy your weekend of football. Enjoy your Jets football. We appreciate you. We love you, and we'll talk to you next week. Peace.